"Can I wash the dishes for leftovers?" the little girl asked, her voice trembling but her eyes steady. She stood on the polished marble floor of the grand kitchen, her tiny hands clasped together, staring up at the towering figure of Mr. Holden, one of the wealthiest men in the city. Mr. Holden had been in the middle of a phone call, pacing back and forth in his pristine white shirt, the cufflinks on his wrists catching the chandelier's light. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, with a sudden sharp motion, he hung up the phone and turned toward her. His gaze lingered, not on her clothes, which were worn and a size too big, nor on her scuffed shoes, but on her face. There was no begging in her expression, no tears. Just quiet hunger and determination. He walked to the counter, took a crystal wine glass, and in an odd, deliberate gesture, let it slip from his fingers. It shattered on the floor, the sound echoing like breaking ice. The maid gasped in the doorway, but Mr. Holden didn't look at her. "Do you know why I did that?" he asked the girl, his voice low but not unkind. She shook her head. "Because I wanted to see if you'd flinch," he said, crouching to meet her eyes. "But you didn't. You're not afraid of mess, are you?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "If there's food after, I'm not afraid of anything." Something in his expression shifted, curiosity mingled with something else, almost like respect. "Fine," he said. "You can wash the dishes. But the dishes aren't the real test." Before she could ask what he meant, he motioned for her to follow him. They passed the gleaming kitchen counters, through a hallway lined with art worth more than most people's homes, until they reached a heavy oak door. He unlocked it, revealing a room she hadn't expected, a library, but not just any library. It smelled of old paper and cedar wood, its shelves stretching to the ceiling, filled with books that looked older than her grandmother's house. "This," he said, "is where the real work begins." She hesitated on the threshold. "I thought I was washing dishes." "You are," he replied. "But the dishes you'll wash tonight are the kind no sponge can clean." And with that, he walked inside, leaving the door open. The air in the room felt charged, almost humming, as if it held secrets waiting to be spilled. She stepped in after him, not yet knowing that what waited for her in that library would change her hunger forever, not just for food, but for something far more dangerous. He pulled a small wooden box from a shelf and set it on the table. It was carved with symbols she didn't recognize, the wood so dark it seemed to swallow the lamplight. "Before you eat," he said, "you must open this." She reached out a hand, her fingers brushing the lid, only to feel a faint warmth, like it was alive. Her fingers lingered on the lid, feeling the warmth pulse faintly beneath the carved symbols, as though the box itself had a heartbeat. She glanced up at Mr. Holden, but his expression revealed nothing, only that unreadable half-smile, the kind that could mean danger or opportunity, or both. "What's inside?" she asked quietly. "If I told you," he said, "you wouldn't want to open it. And if you don't open it, you'll never eat here again." Her stomach clenched, not from fear, but from hunger. That gnawing ache had been her companion for days now, and it was louder than caution. She wrapped her fingers around the edges of the lid and tried to lift it. It didn't budge. "It's stuck," she said, tugging harder. "It's not stuck," he replied, pacing slowly around the table. "It's locked in a way that can't be opened by force. The question is, are you clever enough to figure it out?" Her eyes darted to the symbols etched into the wood. They weren't letters she knew, no alphabet from school, no numbers, but there was a rhythm to them. Circles inside triangles, jagged lines, dots like stars. She traced them one by one, feeling grooves and ridges, until her fingertips found one that felt different, shallower, almost worn smooth by time. She pressed it. A faint click echoed in the quiet room. Mr. Holden stopped pacing, tilting his head as if assessing her in a new light. The box trembled ever so slightly, just for a heartbeat, then stilled. She pressed another symbol, this one shaped like a crescent, and another click followed. "You're halfway there," Mr. Holden murmured, stepping closer. "But be careful. One wrong press, and it resets." She bit her lip. Hunger warred with caution again, But she wasn't going to fail. She looked for the third mark, something that fit the pattern in her head, something that seemed like it belonged after the others. Her eyes landed on a shape that looked almost like a sun with too many rays. She pressed it gently. The box made a softer sound this time, more like a sigh than a click, and the lid rose on its own, releasing a faint wisp of warm, perfumed air. Inside was not what she expected. No jewels, no money, no keys. Instead, there was a single spoon, silver, gleaming, and far heavier than it looked. The handle was engraved with the same strange symbols as the box, and as she picked it up, the warmth seeped into her palm. She looked up, frowning. A spoon. Mr. Holden smiled, not kindly, but not cruelly either. A very particular spoon. In my house, you don't just eat with any utensil. That, he pointed at it, is the only spoon that will fill you. She stared at him, uncertain if he was joking. It's just a spoon. Try to eat without it, he said, and you'll see. Before she could argue, the door to the library opened, and the maid from earlier stepped in, holding a tray. On it was a bowl of soup, thick, golden, and smelling so good that her stomach actually hurt from wanting it. The maid set it down on the table without a word, her eyes flicking nervously between the girl and Mr. Holden before retreating. Go on, Mr. Holden said, gesturing to the soup. She didn't need to be told twice. She dipped the silver spoon into the bowl and brought it to her lips. The moment the soup touched her tongue, it was as if she had never truly eaten before. Flavors bloomed in her mouth, richer and deeper than anything she'd known, and a warmth spread through her chest like a quiet fire. She devoured spoonful after spoonful, unable to stop, the world narrowing to just the taste, the comfort, the slow, melting satisfaction. When the bowl was empty, she sat back, breathing hard, feeling something strange, like her hunger had been satisfied, but in a way that reached beyond her stomach. Good, Mr. Holden said softly. Now you understand. She didn't understand, not really. But she nodded anyway. Keep the spoon, he continued. But remember, once you've eaten with it, you'll always need it. No other utensil will ever make you full again. Her brows furrowed. Why would I need? Because, he interrupted, you'll be coming back. If you want to survive, you'll have to. The words sent a shiver through her, though she couldn't explain why. That night, when she left the mansion, the spoon was tucked safely in the pocket of her oversized coat. She told herself it didn't mean anything, that it was just a strange rich man's eccentricity, but deep down, she knew something had shifted. The next day, her hunger returned, sharper than before. She tried eating the bread an old woman at the market gave her, but after 2 bites, it was as if she hadn't eaten at all. No matter what she tried, the ache stayed, gnawing at her until she could think of nothing else but the spoon. By the 3rd day, she was back at Mr. Holden's door. The butler let her in this time, saying nothing as he guided her to the library. Mr. Holden was already there, reading an old leather-bound book. He didn't look up. You're back sooner than I thought, he said. I'm hungry, she admitted, hating the way her voice cracked on the word. He closed the book and gestured to the table. Another bowl of soup waited there, steam curling in the air. As she ate, she noticed that the room felt warmer than before, and the shadows in the corners seemed deeper. When she was finished, she set the spoon down and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. What is this spoon? She asked finally. It's a key, he said simply. But not to any door you've seen. A key to what? To more than food. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. To debts. To power. To chains you won't see until you've already worn them. She didn't like the sound of that. Then why give it to me? Because you asked to work for food, he said. And I believe in payment. But I never said what the payment would cost you. Her chest tightened. I don't owe you anything. You will, he said. Outside, a sudden crash of thunder rattled the windows, though she hadn't seen a single cloud on her way in. The air in the library thickened, pressing in around her. You can leave now, he said, leaning back in his chair. But next time you're hungry, You'll know where to find me. She clutched the spoon tighter in her pocket as she left. That night, she dreamed of the box, the carved symbols glowing faintly, the lid opening to reveal not just the spoon, but something else inside, something she couldn't quite see before waking. Her hunger was worse when she opened her eyes. The following week blurred into a haze of half meals and growing desperation. She avoided going back as long as she could, but the moment she gave in, the relief of eating from the spoon was so overwhelming she almost cried. This time, after she finished, Mr. Holden didn't let her leave immediately. "There's another box," he said. "You've proven you can open one. I want to see if you can open the second." She hesitated. "What's inside it?" "Something that will make you hungrier," he said, "but in a way you'll thank me for." Her pulse quickened. Against her better judgment, she followed him again, this time to a smaller room at the far end of the hall. It was darker here, the walls lined with narrow drawers instead of bookshelves. He stopped at one, slid it open, and revealed a box even smaller than the first, black, with silver inlays shaped like delicate vines. "This one," he said, "doesn't open with your hands. It opens with a choice." She frowned. "What kind of choice?" "One that you can't undo." And before she could ask what he meant, the floor beneath her seemed to shift. No, not the floor, but the room itself, tilting, stretching, as if the walls were leaning closer. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Mr. Holden's voice was calm, steady, and far too close. "If you want to eat again, open it." She reached toward the box. The air seemed to hum beneath her skin. Her fingertips hovered over the box's smooth surface, the silver inlays glinting faintly in the dim light. It was cold to the touch, so cold it burned. She snatched her hand back with a hiss. Mr. Holden didn't flinch. He only studied her as if she were a puzzle piece sliding into place. "It's not just metal," she whispered, rubbing her fingers. "It's something else." "Good," he said quietly. "You can feel it." She looked at him warily. "Feel what?" "The price." Her stomach knotted. "You said it opens with a choice." "What choice?" Mr. Holden rested one hand on the top of the box. "The choice to trade. You give it something, and it gives you something back. What you get depends on what you give." Her eyes narrowed. "And what if I give it nothing?" "Then it stays shut," he said, "and you'll eat bread that tastes like dust for the rest of your life." The words sank into her like stones in water. She thought about the days she had gone without food, the cold nights in the abandoned bus shelter where the wind whistled through the broken windows. She thought about the spoon in her pocket, the only thing that had truly fed her in weeks. "What does it want?" she asked. "That," he said, "is the question you'll have to answer. Not with words. With action." The air in the room shifted again, growing thicker, warmer, almost alive. The black box seemed to pulse faintly, like a creature breathing. She stared at it, wondering what in the world she could possibly give it. Her pockets were empty except for the spoon. She wasn't about to give that away. The rest of her belongings amounted to the coat on her back, a frayed ribbon in her hair, and a scrap of paper she had carried for months, an old photograph of her and her mother, taken long before her mother disappeared. Her hand slipped into her pocket and touched the photograph. The edges were soft from being handled too much. The thought of losing it made her chest ache. Mr. Holden's voice was almost a whisper now. "The greater the value to you, the greater the return." She froze. He hadn't seen what she held, but somehow he knew. "You mean," she said slowly, "I have to give it something that matters?" He nodded. "The box knows the weight of a thing. It doesn't care about gold or silver unless they mean something to you." Her eyes dropped to the photograph. If she gave it away, it would be gone forever. She would have nothing left of her mother but memory, and even that felt fragile some days. But the hunger was back. It wasn't just in her stomach now. It was in her bones, her thoughts, her skin. She stepped closer to the box. The air around it felt warmer than before, drawing her in. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the photograph from her pocket and laid it on the black surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the silver vines shivered, curling inward until they wrapped around the photograph and pulled it into the box as though it were swallowing it whole. The lid clicked open. Inside was a small, round object, a seed, pale gold, smooth as glass. It seemed to hum faintly in her palm when she lifted it out. "What is it?" she asked. Mr. Holden's eyes glinted. "Plant it." She blinked. "Where?" He smiled. "That's the fun part. The seed will tell you where it wants to be. When you find the place, plant it, and it will give you what you've traded for." She looked down at the seed, feeling its warmth seep into her skin. "And if I plant it in the wrong place?" "Then it will die," he said simply. "And your trade will have been for nothing." The weight of what she had just lost pressed down on her, but she forced herself to stand straighter. "When do I have to plant it?" "Before the next full moon," he said, glancing at the grandfather clock in the corner. "After that, it will wither." She tucked the seed into her coat pocket, careful not to let it touch the spoon. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice sharper than before. He leaned back against the wall, folding his arms. "Because you came here asking for food. And I don't give without teaching a lesson." "That's not a lesson," she muttered. "It's a trap." "Every lesson is a trap," he said, "until you learn how to spring it yourself." She didn't reply. She just turned and walked out of the room, the seed heavy in her pocket. Outside, the sky was bruised with sunset. She made her way through the winding streets, the cold air biting at her cheeks. She had no idea where the seed wanted to be planted, but the longer she held it, the more she felt a faint tug, like a thread pulling her in a certain direction. It led her away from the busy parts of the city, past shuttered shops and crumbling stone walls, until she reached the edge of the old train yard. The tracks were rusted, the weeds high, the silence heavy. The tug in her chest grew stronger here. She stepped between the rails, crunching over gravel, until she found a patch of earth where the ground was softer, warmer, as if the sun had lingered there longer than anywhere else. The seed seemed to almost vibrate in her hand. She knelt, dug a small hole with her fingers, and placed it inside. The moment the soil covered it, the ground pulsed, once, twice, and then something began to grow. At first, it was just a thin green stem, but it grew faster than any plant she had ever seen, curling upward, sprouting leaves of shimmering gold. Within moments, it bore a single fruit, a deep crimson sphere, glowing faintly in the fading light. She reached for it, and as her fingers brushed its smooth surface, a voice, not quite heard, not quite thought, whispered in her mind, "Eat." Her hunger roared. She bit into the fruit without hesitation. The taste was unlike anything she had known, sweet, sharp, almost electric. The moment she swallowed, warmth flooded her, but it was different from the spoon's warmth. This was sharper, clearer, as if it had poured light into her veins. When she finished, the plant crumbled into dust, carried away by the evening wind. She stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, her mind strangely clear. She didn't feel just fed, she felt awake in a way she hadn't before, as though her thoughts had been sharpened into fine edges. Somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard Mr. Holden's voice, though there was no one around. "Every gift changes you." Her hand slipped into her pocket, feeling the spoon's familiar weight. She wondered if the two would begin to hunger for each other, if the spoon's food and the seed's fruit were pieces of the same puzzle. That night she didn't dream. Or maybe she did, but the dreams were too sharp, too vivid to feel like dreams at all. She saw the library again, but this time, the shelves were full of boxes. Hundreds of them, each with different carvings, each humming faintly. She walked among them, her footsteps echoing. When she reached out to touch one, the symbols lit up beneath her fingers. She woke with the taste of the fruit still on her tongue. The hunger didn't return that day, nor the next. But on the third day, it came back, not as a gnawing in her stomach, but as a restless pull, a need to see the boxes again. When she returned to the mansion, Mr. Holden was waiting for her in the hall. "You planted it," he said, his voice a mixture of statement and satisfaction. "Yes," she replied. And I ate it. He studied her face for a long moment. You're different. She didn't argue. There's a third box, he said at last. This time, she didn't hesitate. Show me. He led her down a staircase she hadn't seen before, into a part of the mansion that smelled faintly of earth and stone. The walls here were rough, the air cooler, the light dim. At the bottom was a single pedestal, and on it, a box unlike the others, made entirely of glass, with something dark swirling inside. This one, he said, doesn't open for the hungry. It opens for the desperate. She stared at the shifting darkness within. And if I'm not desperate, then you'll never touch what's inside. She stepped closer, the glass cool under her fingertips. The darkness inside seemed to notice her, swirling faster. What's in it? She asked. His lips curved faintly. Something you'll wish you'd never seen, and something you'll never be able to give back. She didn't move her hand. The swirling darkness pressed against the glass, as though trying to meet her palm. She could feel it, like a whisper she couldn't quite hear. Pulling her in, her palm remained against the cool glass, and the darkness inside writhed like ink in water, thickening, coiling into shapes that dissolved before she could truly see them. A sound began, so faint it was almost imagined, a murmur that seemed to rise from the glass itself. It wasn't in any language she knew, yet it brushed against her thoughts as though it already understood her. The air in the chamber pressed closer. She could feel Mr. Holden's gaze fixed on her, patient, waiting. "What is it saying?" she whispered without looking at him. "It's not speaking," he replied. "It's listening." Her eyes narrowed at the swirling dark. "To what?" "To you." The darkness slowed its restless shifting, curling inward like a snake settling to watch. She felt an odd pressure in her chest, not painful, but heavy, as though the thing in the box was weighing her, judging her. "What does it want?" she asked. "Desperation," Holden said softly. "The kind you don't pretend about. It can smell a lie." She thought about hunger. About cold nights in the bus shelter. About the time she went 2 days without water, her lips cracked until they bled. But this was different. The pressure in her chest seemed to be tugging at something deeper, something she didn't want to name. She stepped back. "I'm not desperate enough." Holden's head tilted, the faintest smile playing at his mouth. "Not yet." The box's swirling dark grew still, almost as if it had turned away from her. The weight in the room eased. "You can come back when you are," Holden said, turning away. "The box won't move from here. But every day you don't open it, it will remember your face." Her throat tightened. "What happens if I never open it?" "Then you'll always wonder." She hated the calm certainty in his tone, but she followed him back up the stairs. The air on the main floor felt too bright, too clean after the stone chamber. He didn't speak to her again as she left the mansion. For days, she tried to ignore the memory of the glass box, the way the darkness had moved as if it knew her. But it kept slipping into her thoughts, uninvited, a cold thread winding around her mind. The hunger returned on the 5th day. She ate with the silver spoon, but the food didn't soothe her the way it used to. It left a space inside her, an absence that had nothing to do with her stomach. By the 7th day, she stopped pretending. She returned to the mansion. Holden met her in the hall again, as if he had been expecting her. "You're ready." "I don't know," she admitted. "Then you are," he said, and led her down the same hidden staircase. The glass box waited on its pedestal. This time, the darkness inside was already moving before she touched it, spiraling faster, pressing against the glass like it had been awake for days. She placed both hands on the surface. It was colder than before, biting into her skin until her fingertips ached. The murmur began again, and she closed her eyes, letting it pull her under. Images bloomed in the dark behind her eyelids. Not memories, not dreams, but something in between. She saw herself standing on a street corner in the rain, clothes clinging to her, watching strangers pass without a glance. She saw a bed she had once slept in, the sheets clean, the air warm, and then the bed was empty, the room stripped bare. She saw her mother's face, turned away, fading into shadow. Her chest burned. Her breath came fast. The darkness was inside her now, curling through her thoughts. It whispered, not in words, but in feeling, and the feeling was give. "I don't have anything left," she said aloud, voice shaking. "Yes, you do." Holden's voice came from somewhere behind her, but far away. The pressure in her chest deepened until it was hard to breathe. She realized the darkness wasn't asking for an object like the black box had. It wanted something else. Her eyes opened, and she saw her reflection in the glass, only it wasn't quite hers. The eyes looking back at her were sharper, older, and there was something moving in their depths. "What does it want?" she whispered again. "Something you can't get back," Holden said. And she knew. The darkness wanted her name. Not just the sound of it, but the part of her that lived inside it, the tether that tied her to herself. She didn't know how she knew, but the knowledge sat in her like a stone. Her first thought was no. If she gave it that, she would be... what? Unnamed? Unanchored? Would she still be herself? Her second thought was yes, because the hunger inside her now wasn't for food. It was for whatever the box promised. The darkness waited. She leaned closer to the glass. "If I give it," she said slowly, "what will I get?" Holden's voice was calm. "What you think you need." She thought of the silver spoon, the golden seed, the crimson fruit. All of it had been what she needed, even if she hadn't known it before. Her decision came like the closing of a door. She pressed her forehead to the cold glass and, in her mind, let go of her name. She felt it tear away, not a sound, not a word, but something deeper, and slide into the darkness. The box shuddered. A crack spidered across the glass, and the swirling inside burst outward, not into the room, but into her. She staggered back, gasping. The darkness coiled into her chest, filling the hollow where her name had been. It wasn't cold anymore. It was alive. When she looked down, her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rush of energy that made her feel like she could run for miles without stopping. The glass box was empty now. Holden stood a few steps away, watching her with that same unreadable expression. "How do you feel?" She swallowed. "Different." "You are," he said simply. "Names are chains. You've given yours away. Now nothing can call you unless you wish it to." She wasn't sure if that was freedom or danger. "What did I get?" she asked. "You'll find out the first time you try to do something impossible," he said. Her pulse was still too fast. "Why are you giving me these things?" Holden's smile was small and strange. "Because you keep coming back." She left the mansion without asking more. The air outside felt sharper, and the street sounds seemed louder, as if the world itself had turned its head toward her. That night, she walked past an alley where two men were shouting. One of them shoved the other against the wall. She should have kept walking, but she stopped. "Leave him," she said. The man closest to her turned, eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" She didn't answer. She only thought stop. The word didn't leave her mouth, but it left her mind, and when it did, the man froze, his face twisting in confusion. His hand dropped from the other man's shirt. She blinked. The rush of power was dizzying. The man stumbled back, muttering something she didn't catch, and then both of them were gone. She stood alone in the street, her breath clouding in the cold air. Holden's voice echoed in her memory. "You'll find out the first time you try to do something impossible." She wasn't hungry that night. Or the next. But the hunger that came after wasn't the same. It was bigger. And she knew the mansion still held more boxes. She didn't return right away. Somehow, the longer she stayed away, the more the hunger evolved. It wasn't physical, not like it had been in the beginning. It was something that lived in her thoughts, just beneath her skin, pacing like a restless animal. She could feel it when she walked through the market, when she passed people in the street, when she stood by herself in the silence of night. It wasn't food she craved anymore, it was the next step. The next box. On the 9th night since the glass box, She dreamed again. This time she was not in Holden's library or the stone chamber, but in a vast, windowless hall lit by oil lamps. Boxes stretched out in endless rows, all different shapes and materials. Some hovered above their pedestals, others pulsed faintly like they were breathing. She could hear them, not in words, but in vibrations under her skin. A low thrumming that grew louder the further she walked. She stopped in front of one that was not like the rest. It was shaped like a coffin, long and narrow, carved from some black wood that drank in the light. She reached for it, and the moment her fingers brushed it, she woke. Her chest was tight, her heart still hammering as though she had been running. She sat up in the dim light of the old bus shelter where she slept, and in the farthest corner, she swore she saw the faint outline of a box-shaped shadow that vanished when she blinked. By morning, she knew she couldn't put it off. Holden answered the door himself when she arrived. He seemed unsurprised. "The dreams have started." She nodded. "You knew they would. They start for everyone, after a certain point." His eyes flicked to the spoon tucked in her coat pocket as though to remind her of how far she'd come already. "The dreams are the boxes calling to you." "I saw one," she said. "It was black. Longer than the others. He cut her off. "Then it's time you saw it while awake." He didn't take her down the staircase or through the library this time. Instead, he led her outside, across the frost-stiff grass of the back garden, to an iron door set into the ground like the entrance to a storm shelter. The metal was scarred with deep scratches, some fresh, some rusted over. Holden unlocked it with a key the length of her forearm. The hinges groaned as the door opened, revealing a steep stairwell lit by a single line of dim bulbs. The air that rose up was damp and metallic, and beneath it was a faint scent she couldn't name, something sharp and strange. The steps took them down further than she expected, until the light from above was only a pinprick. They came to a corridor lined with heavy metal doors, each marked with a number. Holden stopped at the one marked 13 and produced another key. "You'll want to be careful in here," he said, sliding the lock open. "What's inside? A box you don't open by accident." The door swung inward with surprising ease. The room was narrow, cold, and entirely empty except for the object in the center, the coffin-shaped box from her dream. In the dim light, it looked even larger, its surface so black it made her dizzy to look at, as though it swallowed the room around it. She stepped closer, but the air changed with each step, growing heavier, colder. Her breath misted in front of her. She could feel it, whatever was inside, pressing against the walls of its container. "Why is it shaped like that?" she asked quietly. "Because," Holden said, "it holds something alive." Her pulse jumped. Alive. Not in the way you think. Her fingers hovered above the wood. She could feel faint vibrations coming from it, like the echo of a heartbeat too slow to be human. "What does it want from me?" He studied her for a long moment. "It doesn't want from you. It wants with you. It needs someone to agree to carry it." She frowned. "Carry it where?" "Out of here. Into the world. Until it finds what it's looking for." "And what's that?" He smiled faintly. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." She kept her hand above the surface, not quite touching. The hunger inside her shifted, stretching toward the box. It was different than the pull from the others. This wasn't a transaction or a trade. This was recognition. "What happens if I agree?" she asked. "It becomes yours until the search is over," he said. "You'll be bound to it. You'll feel it move when you sleep. You'll dream its dreams. And when it finds what it's looking for." He stopped. "And," she pressed, "then it will leave you. One way or another." The words lodged in her chest. She should have asked more questions, demanded more answers. But instead, she felt her hand lowering until her fingertips brushed the black wood. The instant she touched it, a shock ran up her arm, not painful, but so sudden she gasped. The heartbeat she'd felt through the air now pulsed directly into her skin. A low thrum began at the base of her skull, steady, patient. "Say yes," Holden said quietly. She didn't even think before she whispered, "Yes." The box's surface rippled, not visibly, but she felt it under her fingers, like something shifting beneath a blanket. The seam down the center split open with a whisper of air, and inside, she saw not a body but a shape made of shadow, curled like a sleeping animal. It lifted its head. Though it had no eyes, she felt its gaze lock onto hers. In one smooth motion, it slid out of the box and into her. The cold hit first, deep, clean, like water from the bottom of a well. Then warmth bloomed in its wake, settling into her bones. The thrum in her skull matched her heartbeat now. Holden watched without blinking. "It knows you now." "What is it?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "A companion," he said. "It will follow you until its work is done. And when it's finished, it won't need you anymore." She looked back at the empty box. The inside was lined with silver filigree that glimmered faintly, like it had been holding the shadow in place. She thought she saw faint claw marks along the edges. The shadow inside her shifted, as though impatient. She could feel its attention stretching outward, searching. Holden shut the lid and locked the box again. "It's time you left. It won't want to stay underground any longer." She followed him back up the long stairwell, the presence inside her moving like a second heartbeat. The world outside seemed louder, sharper. The wind stung her cheeks. The sound of footsteps echoed further. She felt as though she could hear every movement in the grass, every shift of the air. The shadow stirred, and for a moment, she felt a flicker of its thoughts. Not words, just impressions. A direction. A pull. Something it was seeking. She realized then that it would never speak aloud. Its language was feeling, and she would have to learn to listen. Holden closed the iron door behind them. "It will lead you," he said. "Follow it, but remember, its goal is not yours. And when you find what it's after, you'll have a choice to make." "What choice?" "To keep it," he said, "or to let it take what it came for." She wanted to ask what that meant, but the shadow inside her surged, tugging her toward the edge of the garden. Her feet moved before she could think. Holden didn't stop her. She left the mansion grounds without looking back, the pull growing stronger with every step. The streets blurred past. She barely noticed when day faded into night, or when the lamps lit in the windows of the narrow buildings she passed. The pull brought her to the edge of the river. The water was dark and fast, the current swollen from recent rains. The shadow inside her went still, as if listening. Then it pushed, not physically, but in her mind, toward the bridge that spanned the river. She crossed, her footsteps echoing against the stone. Halfway across, she saw him. A man standing at the rail, his coat flapping in the wind, his hands gripping the metal. His head was bowed, and she could see the tremor in his arms from where she stood. The shadow inside her went rigid. It was not hunger she felt from it now. It was focus. She took a step closer. "Hey!" she called softly. The man didn't look up. The shadow moved again, pressing her forward. She closed the distance until she was just a few feet away. The man's knuckles were white against the railing. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his shoulder. The moment her skin met his, the shadow surged out of her. Not all of it, but enough to wrap around him like smoke. The wind stilled for a moment. The man's shoulders eased. His grip on the railing loosened. He looked at her then, his eyes red-rimmed but steady. "Go home," she said. She didn't know if it was her voice or the shadow's will that made him turn and walk away, but he did. When he was gone, the shadow slid back into her. It was calmer now, its pulse quieter. And she realized, whatever it was searching for, she had just helped it find one piece of it. But there would be more. Many more. The days blurred into one another after that night on the bridge, but every one of them carried weight. She didn't need to ask the shadow what it wanted. She felt it always, like a current pulling beneath the surface of her thoughts. Sometimes it led her into places she never would have gone before. Crowded markets, silent alleys, rooftops slick with rain. Sometimes it was the quiet moments, sitting on the steps of an old church at midnight, staring at the river until dawn, that seemed to matter most. People began to notice her. Not for her clothes or her face, but for something else, something they couldn't quite name. Strangers would stop her, their voices tight, their eyes searching, as though they had been waiting for her without realizing it. And every time, the shadow would shift inside her, testing the air like a hunter. Sometimes it would reach out to them, invisible and silent, leaving behind a kind of stillness they would never forget. It wasn't kindness, exactly. It wasn't cruelty, either. It was something older, stranger, an exchange neither of them spoke about. And always, after each encounter, the shadow would grow quieter for a while, its pulse slower, as though it had taken one step closer to whatever end it was chasing. The hunger she had once known, the ache in her belly that had driven her to Holden's door, was gone. In its place was a hunger of a different kind, and it was hers now as much as it was the shadow's. She no longer thought about resisting it. The seed, the spoon, the glass box, they had all been leading here. Every choice she'd made had been another key turning in another lock, opening doors she hadn't even known were there. Holden didn't summon her. He didn't need to. She saw him only twice in those weeks, and both times he said the same thing, as if reminding her of something she should already know. The choice will come. You'll know it when it does. She wondered, sometimes, if he had carried a shadow once. If he still did. Then came the night the pull became something more than a thread in her mind. It was a command. Urgent. Heavy. It woke her from sleep with her heart pounding and her hands already moving to put on her coat. The streets were slick with rain as she followed it, the lamps casting fractured halos in the puddles. It led her to the outskirts of the city, to a building she had never seen before. Tall, windowless, its walls of black stone glistening in the wet. A single door stood at its base, and above it, carved into the stone, was a symbol she recognized from the first box Holden had given her. The shadow inside her surged, pressing against her ribs, her lungs. Not words, but intent. Inside. She pushed open the door. The air inside was warm and thick, smelling faintly of burning wood and something metallic. The space was vast, a single chamber lit by hundreds of candles set in iron brackets along the walls. At the far end stood a pedestal. And on that pedestal, a box. Not just any box. This one was made of the same black wood as the coffin-shaped one, but smaller, square, its surface inlaid with silver that spiraled into a single circle at the center. Even from across the room, she could feel it humming, not like the others had, not with hunger or expectation, but with something like recognition. She walked toward it slowly, each step echoing against the stone floor. The shadow's pulse quickened until it matched her own heartbeat. When she reached the pedestal, she saw that the silver circle was not solid. It was an opening, just wide enough for a hand. And in the depths beyond the opening, something moved. She understood without needing to be told. This was what the shadow had been searching for. Not an object. Not a person. Another shadow. Her breath came faster. The one inside her was almost trembling now, its pulse loud in her ears. She could feel it pressing against her, straining toward the box. Holden's voice echoed in her memory. When you find what it's after, you'll have a choice to make. The choice. She placed her hand on the box, and the surface was warm, warmer than it should have been. The thing inside the silver circle stirred at her touch, a ripple in the darkness, and for a moment she thought she heard something like a sigh. The shadow inside her leaned forward, reaching. She understood the choice now. She could let it go, release it into the box, let it rejoin whatever it had been separated from. Or she could keep it, bind it to herself for as long as she lived, make its power her own forever. The second option burned in her mind. The shadow had given her so much already. Strength, clarity, the power to change things she had once been powerless to touch. If she kept it, she could do more. So much more. But beneath that thought was another, colder one. If she kept it, it would never stop hungering. And neither would she. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the pedestal. The shadow pressed harder now, not violently, but insistently, like a tide coming in. It wasn't begging. It wasn't promising. It was simply waiting. She closed her eyes. In the darkness, she saw all the places it had taken her, all the faces she'd seen in its wake. She saw the bridge, the man stepping back from the railing. She saw the fruit tree that had grown from the golden seed. She saw the first moment she had stood in Holden's library, a hungry girl with nothing but a question on her lips. She opened her eyes. The shadow inside her paused, sensing her decision. Slowly, she lifted her hand and placed it inside the silver circle. The second her skin crossed the threshold, the shadow tore free, not in pain, but in a rush so powerful it stole her breath. It poured out of her like smoke from a fire, vanishing into the darkness inside the box. For a heartbeat, the air around her seemed to hold its breath. Then the silver inlays blazed with light, and the box shuddered once before going still. She stumbled back, her chest suddenly empty, her heartbeat her own again. The world felt quieter, smaller. And yet, there was a strange lightness in her bones, as though she had been carrying a weight she hadn't realized until it was gone. She didn't notice Holden until he was standing beside her. "You chose to let it go," he said. She nodded. "It wasn't mine to keep." He studied her for a moment, then gave the smallest smile she had ever seen on his face. "Most people don't make that choice." "Then why give them the option?" she asked. "Because choice is the only thing worth having," he said. "And it's the one thing you can't put in a box." They left the chamber together, the candles flickering in their wake. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was clearing, the moon pale and thin above the city. She realized she didn't feel the pull of the boxes anymore. The hunger was gone, not fed, but finished. Holden stopped at the edge of the street. "This is where I leave you," he said. She turned to him. "Will I ever see you again?" He shrugged lightly. "If you find another box. Or if one finds you." Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows between two buildings as though he had never been there. She stood alone for a long time, breathing in the cool air, feeling the weightless space where the shadow had been. It didn't ache. It didn't feel empty. It just was. In her pocket, the silver spoon was warm against her fingers. She pulled it out, turning it over in her hand. It had no glow, no hum, no strange pulse anymore. It was just a spoon now, ordinary, unremarkable. And somehow that felt right. She slipped it back into her pocket and began walking, not toward any place in particular, but forward. The city stretched out ahead of her, full of locked doors and unopened boxes. She no longer needed them, but she knew they were still there, waiting for someone else to come looking. And somewhere far behind her, in a candlelit chamber of black stone, a small box sat silent on its pedestal, holding two shadows that had finally found each other again. The world would turn, and the boxes would wait, as they always had. And she, no longer hungry, no longer nameless, walked on.